top 3 questions that new teachers have when entering the profession have been revealed and they are being answered. Watch this. Studies show that the top 3 questions new teachers have are: how do I effectively manage classroom behavior? Obviously. How do I plan engaging and effective lessons? I get it. And how can I build strong relationships with my students? Those are the questions, and I've got the answers. They are going to be revealed on this episode of New Teacher, Big Impact, the podcast. But before we get into it, I've got a confession. I used to do all of these things terribly, which is why I call myself a former terrible teacher. When I first came into the profession, these are things that I completely struggled with. Luckily, I was able to figure these things out. And in figuring them out, not only was I able to have a huge impact on students, but I was able to transition from that terrible teacher to a 2-time teacher of the year that eventually began training other teachers to have huge impacts in their classes as well. That's why through the New Teacher Big Impact podcast, my goal as your host, Daryl Williams Jr, is to help new teachers have a big impact on student achievement data without burning out, without feeling unsupported, and without changing who they are. So I'm super excited about diving into these 3 questions today. I do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Impact. Impact is a brand new professional development solution that features courses, coaching, and community to help you have your best year ever. Learn how to master the proven principles of effective instruction so that you can confidently lead your classroom and make the impact that only you can. And the best way to do that is through Impact. There's information in the show notes and in the description below for how to sign up and get access to the complete library, as well as the community and access to courses and access to coaching, all right? The 3 C's, you've got it. So let's get right into the first question. How do I effectively manage classroom behavior? While I go through these things, I'm first gonna let you know what it's not, what it is, and then one question that you can ask yourself. Because I can give you a lot of information, but I think if I can synthesize it to just one question that you can ask yourself when it comes to this principle, then just in thinking of that one question, it should be able to set you up for success. So what classroom management is not, it's not just harsh discipline, right? It's not giving kids a whole bunch of candy so that they'll sit down. It's not, I was going to say corporal punishment, right? It's not everybody seated in rows silently and glued to the screen, right? It's not those things. Not saying that rows are bad, not saying that students should be silent. I'm saying their classroom management is not just this one thing that we do that gets students in line and silent and controlled. That's not what classroom management is. Classroom management, and when you really think about the words and break it down, classroom management is just making sure that students are adhering to the expectations that were set for the class. The reason why is because when students are adhering to the expectations that were set for the class, then it allows for students to receive new information, right? So students obviously need to be able to receive information that is being taught. After they receive the information, they retain the information, we evaluate what they need, and we can continue moving on from there. But it first starts with them being able to receive. If they're in an environment where they cannot receive new information, then there's absolutely no way that they can retain or be transformed by the information that we give them. So regardless of the class, the subject area, or whatever it is that you're teaching, if students can't receive new information because of distractions that are going on in class or because of a poor classroom environment, it doesn't matter how much content knowledge you have as a teacher. It doesn't matter how many years of experience you have as a teacher. It doesn't matter how much you care as a teacher that students reach their full potential. If they're not receiving the information, there will not be a transformation. Is that making sense? That's what classroom management is. It's making sure that students are adhering to the classroom expectations so that everybody in class is open to receiving the information. So as in thinking about that, obviously that means that there need to be some sort of classroom expectations. So here we go. As we're diving into the first question, how do I effectively manage classroom behavior? The first thing that you have to do is make sure that you have expectations. Students are not going to just read your brain and be able to just decide what it is you want them to do. So I'm going to use a relationship example here because my wife and I have this conversation all the time, right? her love language is quality time as well as acts of service. That's probably acts of service first, but that's her love language, right? I understand that. So what I try to do to give her her love language, to show her that I love her in the way that she likes to receive love, I say, let me go ahead and do acts of service. She has requested that I do the laundry, that I mow the lawn, that I take out the trash, that I wash the dishes. Like, these are just some of my roles inside of the house, right? So there'll be times where I'll come home and and I'll wash the dishes and I'll cook dinner, and then I'll have a conversation with my wife, and I'll feel like there's some sort of resistance. And I had to, question myself, like, what's going on? Like, how's your day? Good. Like, uh, you need anything? No, I'm fine. But I can tell some sort of resistance, right? And I'm like, babe, what's going on? And she's like, well, I really wish that you would have mowed the lawn today. And I was like, well, I washed the dishes, I cooked dinner, I took out the trash. She said, yeah, but I needed the lawn to be mowed. I said, but you didn't tell me that you needed the lawn to be mowed. And then of course you say, you don't see that the lawn needs to be mowed. I said, well, when I look at it, it looks fine. Like, it gets, we have different standards of lawn etiquette. We have different standards of what the lawn should look like. And that's no fault of mine, no fault of hers. It's just when I looked at it, it looked like, okay, like we got another 3-4 days before it needs to be mowed. But she's looking at it like, whoa, it needs to be mowed now. But I don't know that because I don't live inside of her mind. So then I always say, listen, we have this conversation so often. And I just say, babe, I can't read your mind, but I promise, if you just tell me what you want me to do, I'll make it happen. Right? And students are the same way when it comes to communication. They're not going to read your mind. They're not going to come in and say, wow, I know that Miss Jacobs wants me to come in, sit down, get my books out, and put it on the desk. If you don't communicate that to them, if you don't let them know, come in and get started on the do now, if you don't let them know, come in at a voice level 1, if you don't let them know, don't hit somebody in the back of the head on the way to your seat, if you don't let them know, right? Like, if you don't let them know these things, then we can't hold them to that expectation. You can't say, well, they should know. Well, yeah, my wife said I should know to mow the lawn. I was going to mow the lawn 3 days from now. Oh, you wanted it mowed today? You should have told me I need the lawn mowed on Tuesday. You see what I'm saying? And the reason why I'm saying all that is because I remember myself, I told you, my confession was I struggled so much with these things as a new teacher. I remember myself that I would come in and just think, okay, these students, I was teaching 7th grade math. These students are 12, 13 years old. They've been in school before. They should know how to fall in line. Don't have that false expectation that students already know what the expectations are. Set and state the expectations for your class. Not only should you set and state them, but you should revisit them often. So we're transitioning right now to coaching. Let me coach you right here, right now. There should be 3 to 5 classroom expectations. Your classroom expectations are the things that students need to do on a consistent basis in order to see success in your class. These are the expectations that students should meet. For example, students should remain focused and avoid distractions. That can be an expectation because I know that when students are remaining focused on the lesson and avoiding distractions, whether it's their cell phone out under their desk, whether it's reading a book that they shouldn't be reading because their eyes need to be focused on this lesson. Whatever the distraction is, I know the expectation is, wow, if students are focused and ignoring distractions, then they can see success in my class. What's another thing? Somebody may say, okay, well, if students are respectful to one another, that might be a classroom expectation. Because when they're mean to one another, their morale is low. When morale is low, then they're in their heads and they're not really focused on what's going on in class. They're not paying attention. It's just a poor climate, a poor culture in the classroom. But if students are respectful and kind to one another, then we can grow together. Maybe that's an expectation. I'm not going to set the expectations for you because what I think is the beautiful thing about this is that it's your classroom. What is your vision? What is your dream for students? What is your why, the reason why you came into education? And what is the impact that you want to leave on students? Think about what does it take for students to be successful? What does it take for students to be successful in this class? And what 3 to 5 things do students need to do consistently to make sure that they see the success that I know that they can achieve? Because when you list it, when you list out the 3 to 5 expectations, now these are the things that you can hold students accountable to. I told you I was going to give you one question to ask yourself, just in case you forgot 3 to 5 expectations. How many expectations are we supposed to have? Here are the 3 questions. Here's the one question I want you to ask yourself as it pertains to classroom management. The question you ask yourself is, what happens when they don't do the expectation? And what happens when they do? Okay, so what happens when they don't meet the expectation and what happens when they do? Here's why, because that's what's going to form your management system. When we think about incentives and consequences, essentially, again, the expectations are at your core, right? And when students meet the expectations, something should happen. That's known as an incentive or a reward. When students don't meet the expectation, something should happen. That's known as a consequence. Sometimes when we think about classroom management, we think of rewards and consequences, and we just get big on how am I going to punish student misbehavior, right? I hope you're listening to the words I'm using. I never said control the class. I never say punish the students. I never say discipline. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we list the expectations, because the reason why I'm listing the expectations, are you following? Is this making sense? The reason why I'm listing these expectations is because I know that when students meet these expectations, they can be successful in the class. And when they're successful in class, they can be successful there in the future. What happens when they meet the expectation? What happens when they don't? Those then create our incentives, rewards, and consequences. Consequences don't need to be punitive. Consequences just need to be consistent and definite, right? When you fall short of the expectation, a consequence will be administered because I need to remind you of what the expectation is. I care way too much. Some of you may have seen this in a short or reel or something recently. I care way too much about you and your future and to let you fall short of the expectation. So the reason why I'm administering this consequence is to remind you that you are capable of meeting the expectation. And I care way too much to ignore that, to ignore your potential and let you fall short of the expectation, right? Because I know that when you meet the expectation, you can see success. So one of the things that I always love to do is I teach principles and I share strategies, right? That's something that we also do in Impact. What I was mentioning earlier, that full comprehensive solution of professional development. I'm going to teach the principle. That's the principle. The principle is their expectations. When they meet the expectation, something positive happens. When they don't meet the expectation, there's a consequence to reinforce what the expectation was. Okay? That's the principle. You can take that and run with it. But I also like to share strategies as well. Strategies that have worked for me, strategies that you can tweak and maybe use in your classroom as is, or adjust it to what's going to work for you. So here's a strategy. I use a tiered system in which I say, okay, the first time that a student falls short of the expectation, there's a warning. Because the warning just lets them know that I just need you to understand that you're falling short of the expectation right now. Right? Like, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. What you're doing right now is falling short of the expectation. The expectation is that we are remaining focused. And right now, as you are reading your book under the table, you're not paying attention to the lesson. You're not focused. Right? So this is your warning. Put the book away. You see what I'm saying? Then the next thing would be to remove a privilege, one that you can control. Right? So now I'm coming back. Okay, remember, the expectation was us to stay focused and remove distractions. Now you're scrolling on TikTok in the middle of class. I gave you a warning for reading the book. Now I'm going to have to take away a point. Okay, see how this goes? The third one would be an environmental shift. All right, environmental shift means either we're going to put them into some sort of like a reflection section or a cool down corner, or move them to a different table. Just it's an environmental shift within the classroom, just to shake some things up. Okay, maybe your seat right now is not working for you. That's why you're distracted. I care way too much to let you just sit here and remain distracted or distract other people at your table. Take a moment, take 5 minutes in the cool down corner. You can take your work with you. Okay, the next one is going to involve some outside help, which you can send them to a buddy teacher. You can send them to a classroom down the hall. But anytime you send them out, make sure that, I not say send them out, but anytime you lean on another teacher for support, make sure that there's a time limit. Okay, you're going to go to Mr. Johnson's classroom for 10 minutes. You're going to take your work with you. And anytime that a student is removed from class, I always say that's when we communicate with their adults, right? Whoever the adult is, the guardians, whoever they live with, that's who we will communicate with. Okay, so here's a game-changing strategy tip right here. Anytime I'm sending a student out, maybe it's 10 minutes, go to Mr. Johnson's classroom, take your work with you, but you know that since I'm sending you to Mr. Johnson, I have to let your parents know. That's just one of my rules. So watch this. I'm definitely communicating with your adults today. You decide what that communication is going to say. Okay, I just helped somebody. I'm gonna say it one more time. I'm 90% of the time when I use this phrase, students come back and they are meeting the expectations. I say, okay, I'm sending you out. But remember, that means I'm definitely communicating with your grown-ups tonight. But you get to decide what that message is going to say. Is it going to say, I had to send him to Mr. Johnson and he came back, but when he came back, he completely turned it around. He had a great rest of the day. Or is it going to say, I sent him to Mr. Johnson and when he came back, he was still off task and we never got on the right track? You decide what the message is going to say. Most of the time they come back and they're ready to learn. Okay. And then the last step is where we would communicate with administrators. And for those that are saying administrators don't do anything, sometimes I challenge you to think some of the times, in my experience, some of the reasons why administrators don't do anything is because they don't know what the teacher has already done. But if you can show them, I gave them a warning, I removed the privilege, I changed the seat in the classroom, I sent them to Mr. Johnson for 10 minutes, he came back and he's still not doing the things he's supposed to do. More, in my experience, I've seen administrators say, okay, you've done all of that, let's kind of figure out what's going on. Sometimes it's when the administrators are thinking that you haven't done anything but give them a call, is when they say, you don't know how to manage the classroom, I'm not gonna pay attention to this. Not saying it's right, not saying it's wrong, not saying it's gonna work every time, I'm only speaking from my experience, right? But that is how, to answer the question for new teachers, how do we effectively manage classroom behavior? That's it. To give you a rundown one more time, first, make sure that you know what the expectations are and that students know what the expectations are. Then have a system for what happens when they meet the expectation. What rewards are we getting? And that doesn't mean just give everybody candy, right? Sometimes it's just a positive recognition. There's a positive affirmation, paper plate awards, right? You can write, student of the week. You can a classroom, a class party, whatever. Like it could just be when students meet the expectation, there should be some reason. I mean, there should be some reward. Like, oh, you met the expectation. That's awesome. So proud of you. As a result, boom. Don't have to spend a lot of money. It doesn't have to spend any money at all. It's just recognizing students that are doing the right thing. And then when students are falling short of the expectation, make sure that there's some sort of consistent consequence system that doesn't have to be punitive. It's just reminding them, listen, here's what the expectations are. You're falling short of them. If you come in with at least that, you can be set as a new teacher in managing a classroom. All right, there's ways you can grow from there, but that is the baseline. If you start with that, you will be great. I'm reminded of my daughter. My daughter is 5 years old, and if you think about potty training. And potty training, some of you are familiar with it, some of you are not. But I remember she was potty training when she was about 2, 3 years old, and we would tell her, don't use your pot. Don't use the bathroom on yourself. Go to the potty. Go to the restroom. Go, sit in the potty. And I mean, sometimes she'd do it. Sometimes she wouldn't. Right? Like sometimes she would just use the bathroom on herself, and we would always remind her use the potty, and she's like, okay, but like she still wouldn't do it. We, as I know, I just said don't give children candy. Like I know I just said that's not what it is. But here's what we did for my daughter. These trolleys. Oh, do I have any around? I don't have any around me. These trolleys. They're like little sour worms. Every time she successfully used the restroom, we said, okay, you can have one sour gummy worm. When I tell you in like 6 days she was potty trained, she would just go to the bathroom. Anytime she wanted a worm treat, that's what she called it, a worm treat. She would go to the bathroom, use the bathroom, she would come, I'm ready for a worm treat, and she would get it. Why? Because when she was meeting the expectations, she knew that there was a reward associated with it. And then at something that we were struggling with for 2, 3, 4 months, in like 6 days, she became potty trained because she was just like, oh, if I use the potty, I get the worm treats. And now it's just habitual, right? So for those of us that are thinking, man, recognizing I don't want students to just do the right thing for some sort of reward. You can start extrinsic and then it just becomes habitual and becomes an intrinsic motivation. Now she's 5. She doesn't get a worm treat every time she goes to the restroom now. She just does it because it's it's what the habit that she has formed, right? So saying all that to say, what is the expectation that you have? And when students meet the expectation, what is their incentive reward? And when students don't meet the expectation, what is their consequence? For her, her natural consequence was when she used the bathroom on herself, she just didn't get a worm treat, right? And you fell short of the expectation. That's not what I said to her, but you fell short of the expectation. You don't get a worm treat for this one. We can try again the next time you have to use the bathroom. Okay, so same thought process when we were thinking about how to effectively manage classroom behavior. So that's number one. And again, all of these questions, I actually just recorded a course on classroom management in Impact. And Impact is a full comprehensive solution for your professional development needs, featuring my 3 C's: courses, community, and coaching, where you have access to the full library of courses, including that course on classroom management, to help make next school year your best school year so that you can take control of your classroom. There, I use the word control. I didn't even mean to. I didn't mean to use the word control. Not take control of your classroom, but to make sure that students are meeting the expectations in your classroom. The second question that most new teachers ask is, how do I plan engaging and effective lessons? Again, something that I definitely struggled with. How do I plan engaging lessons? It's funny because I remember coming out of college and being 21 years old. I was young. I didn't have a beard yet. I was teaching middle school, so I'm thinking to myself, students are going to respect me because I'm close to their age, right? I'm not one of these old teachers. I'm young. I'm cool. I'm swaggy. Like, swaggy was one of the words we used back in 2014, right? I'm cool. And no, that wasn't the case. I would start teaching my math lesson, and they would still put their heads on the desk. Like, they would still tune out. They would still sneak their phones out under the table. And I was like, man, I think I'm pretty interesting. I think I'm pretty engaging. I'll try to tell jokes that they wouldn't that they wouldn't laugh at, right? And not only was I not engaging, but I wasn't effective. I was not effectively teaching because when I look at my data as a new teacher, my students were in the yellow and the red. I had a couple of green, like 2, 3 out of the whole 130 students that I taught, and definitely no blue. But it wasn't effective. I was teaching, I was speaking, but I can't say that they were learning anything. So this is a very valid question for new teachers. How do we plan engaging and effective lessons? It's going to start with this. What is not, I told you, I'm always going to start with what is not. It's not you standing in front of the classroom and talking, and it's not just going verbatim with whatever the curriculum is. And let me pause right here because I don't want anybody to be upset. But as educators and as teachers, I want to make sure that I say this the correct way. We are evaluated based on how students perform as it relates to the standards. That's just a fact. We are evaluated based on how students perform as it relates to the standards, not as it relates to a particular curriculum. Particular curriculum was purchased by the school to help you teach the standards. So what I'm saying is, to plan an effective lesson is to plan a lesson that is aligned to the standards, not aligned to the curriculum. Now, as an administrator, I understand the world of purchasing curriculum for the school. The goal of purchasing curriculum, I'm going to give you 2 things right here. I'm going to give you the goal from an administrator's lens for the teachers, but I'm also going to give you from a business lens, from 2 different lenses. Here we go. As an administrator, my job, what my heart is saying is I want to make sure the teachers have the resources and access to the resources, curriculum, whatever they need, so that they can teach the students the standards in an effective way. It's really hard to give somebody an unpacking or to give somebody just access to the standards and say, figure out how to teach it. So what we try to do as administrators is find the curriculum that's closely aligned so that it can help effectively teach those standards. Now, that is a great thing. However, let me get it to you from the business lens. All right, I hope you still follow me. Don't lose me. Let me give it to you from a business lens. People who are creating curriculum are businesses. They're companies. They're corporations. They want to sell their curriculum. So yes, they make it standards aligned, but they also try to make it appeal to as many potential clients as possible. Does that make sense? Like, they want to make it appeal to as many customers as possible. They're not making the curriculum specific for the students that are in your classroom. They're making something that they can sell to as many schools, as many districts as possible. So while it's going to be aligned to the standards, it's going to be sometimes a standard may or may not be addressed. Sometimes it may look different in your state than it does in another state, especially if your state doesn't adopt Common Core. Sometimes it'll be in an order that somebody suggested, not necessarily the order that makes the most sense to your students, especially based off of what they learned last year, especially if there was a different curriculum and they learned in a different order, right? So, and it's not even necessarily always an order that makes sense. Whether we're talking math, we're talking ELA, we're talking science, it's not always necessarily in an order that makes sense. It's in an order that the publishers decide to put it in, or the company decide to put it in. Saying all that to say, by the time the curriculum is purchased and given to you, sometimes administrators or schools or districts, whatever, will say, use this curriculum with fidelity. The reason why is because it's an easier way of tracking teacher progress, but it is not the most effective way of assessing teacher efficacy. Well, I hope that made sense. I hope that made sense. It's easier for me to say, all right, let me just make sure that you use this curriculum, right? Than it is for me to get into every single teacher's classroom in the district and evaluate their efficacy if they're not using a scripted curriculum or if they're not using a curriculum. We at that point we'd have to wait until the end of the year until the data comes back in order to say whether or not the teacher was successful. So the easier, not more effective, but the easier way would say, wow, okay, so if we use this curriculum that was sold to us as being one that is effective, and we hold teachers to the expectation of using this curriculum, then we can evaluate along the way and project whether they'll be successful students instead of waiting for the test scores. So that's a long roundabout way of me saying your job as a teacher is not to teach the curriculum. Your job as a teacher is to make sure that students master the standards. So as a new teacher, what is my message to you that's asking the question, how do I plan effective and engaging lessons? Here's the question that you'd ask yourself in order to know if a lesson is effective. Remember, I told you I'm gonna give you a question every time. This is the question that you write down. What is the intended standard aligned outcome for this lesson? If you want to plan effective lessons, every lesson you should ask yourself this question. What is the intended standard aligned outcome for this lesson? And here's a secondary follow-up question. And how will I know if they achieved it? So every lesson, I don't want you to ask yourself, what does the curriculum tell me to teach? The curriculum says we should be on this for a day and a half. The curriculum says that we should spend, you know what I'm saying? The curriculum says that students should work on page 126 and then 127. Like the curriculum may say that, right? But to plan an effective lesson, you need to ask yourself, what is the intended standard aligned outcome for this lesson? Then you can use the curriculum as a resource to help guide you along the way. And for any administrators or district level leaders that are listening to this, the reality is, you know, I'm telling the truth, right? You know, I'm telling the truth. It's just a lot easier for a district leader to say to 1,000 teachers in the district, that's a lot of teachers, to 400 teachers in the district. It's easier to say, okay, all 400 of you that are teaching math, use this curriculum and follow that pacing guide. It's a lot easier than going into 400 different classrooms. You see what I'm saying? So that's why you'll hear use the curriculum to fidelity, you know, but that's also why every couple of years you see curriculum switch, because they're just trying to find data, right? They're just using data. And after 3-4 years of using the curriculum and not seeing the results they want, they're like, oh, let's find a different curriculum. But the standards don't change. Well, not often. The standards are not changing. So plan standards aligned lesson, use the curriculum as a resource. For the engaging piece, because that was a 2-part question, how do we plan engaging and effective lessons? All right, I hope this is helpful. I hope I just released somebody somebody that is just, they said I need to be on this curriculum. All right, they said I need to be on this page on this day. That's what they said, right? But what is your role? What is your job? What is your responsibility? Make sure students understand and master the standards, right? That's how you evaluate whether you're doing your job effectively. And then, so for the engagement, right? Here's the question that you ask yourself to decide how to be engaging. Why would students want to pay attention to this lesson? If you ask yourself that question for every lesson that you plan, I guarantee you will be more engaging. Why do students want to pay attention to this lesson? Or why would students want to pay attention to this lesson? If you just are standing there and talking for 60 minutes and then you give them a worksheet that they work on, why would students want to pay attention for those 60 minutes? They won't. Don't even try to answer that. You are not that interesting. Man, I went to a comedy show. And it was about it was about 40 minutes. And this guy's a comedian. Like, he gets paid to do this. We were on a cruise ship. He gets paid to do this. This is his career, his job. And his comedy was just not my type of comedy. And after about 20 minutes, I got up and left. I would rather go do something else. I walked out. Again, it was a cruise ship, so it's not like I didn't pay for it. I just said, all right, I'm going to go find something else. He's a comedian that gets paid to engage the audience as a career. Like, he studied this. He does this for a living. So you're in your classroom, you're a teacher, you're gonna stand there for 45 minutes and talk? Of course students are gonna raise their hand and say, can I go to the bathroom? Of course students are gonna put their head down on the desk. Right? I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. It's just a fact. You're not as engaging as you think you are. I was not as engaging as I thought I was. I speak for a living. Currently, I travel the world. I do keynote speeches, professional development trainings, presentations, workshops. And when I stand in front of my students, I'm not as engaging as I think I am. I have to use specific strategies to help engage them or to keep them engaged and interested. I ask myself the question, okay, why would students want to pay attention to this lesson? If you ask yourself that question, then you can start to become more engaging. That's how you start to incorporate technology, whether instead of me putting 10 questions on a worksheet, maybe I can put these 10 questions into a booklet, or maybe I can put these 10 questions into a quizzes or Kahoot or whatever it is, right? Just something that's going to keep them a little more engaged. The same 10 questions. All right, we're not gonna use technology. Okay, cool. I'm gonna do a game. Take these same 10 questions and I'm gonna put them around the classroom. And you gotta slap this. I remember I used to play matamuscas in my Spanish class. Matamuscas means fly swatter, I think. And he would give us fly swatters and he would ask the question, and the first person that swatted the right answer on the wall would get it, right? And it's like he could have just given us questions that said, answer these at your seat. But he went to the dollar store and got 5 fly swatters for, at the time it was $5. Right now it probably would be like $7.25. You know, Dollar Tree's like $1.25 now. But he just got fly swatters and just said, this will be more engaging than just asking questions. I'll never forget that. Right? And so what experiences are we creating for our students? What in a couple of years we'll say, man, I'll never forget that lesson, or I'll never forget that time in Miss Jacobson's class where we did whatever. Right? So why would students want to pay attention to this lesson? What can we do to make it more engaging? One of the greatest ways that I like to do it is through storytelling. Like I remember this one time I was teaching, I was doing a student empowerment session in San Diego, California. And I was teaching students on the impact of building a strong foundation. And I told them a story about, don't ever do this, by the way. This was bad. Don't do this. When I was a middle schooler, somebody challenged me to a basketball game, one-on-one, and he said, whoever wins gets to date Samantha. Well, I was already dating Samantha at the time. Like, that was my girlfriend. So basically he was like, if I beat you in one-on-one, then she won't be your girlfriend anymore, she'll be mine. But if you beat me, then you get to keep your girlfriend. That is like a terrible bet, right? And also, never bet people. What are we even doing? This is what happens when you're 12, 13 years old. That's why you shouldn't be dating, right? So I told them the story of how he challenged me, and I was like, I'm not gonna be afraid. So I played him one-on-one, and he completely demolished me, obliterated me. He beat me 7-0. I didn't even score at all. But here's the worst part. I then went to Samantha, and I was like, listen, Andy just beat me in basketball, and the bet was if he wins, then he gets to date you. And Samantha was like, okay, and left me. Like, she broke up with me and started dating Andy. I'm like, how? And I told him the story, and I said, listen, because I didn't build a strong enough skill in basketball, when it was time for me to show what I could do, I wasn't able to perform. Like, with so much on the line, my girlfriend was on the line. Like, I cared about her. I thought that I wanted to be with her. I didn't want to lose her. But he beat me 7-0. I didn't have enough skill to beat him. I didn't build enough skill in playing basketball to be able to beat him in a game of one-on-one. But had I had built the skill, then I've been able to show what I know. Then I'll be able to be more proficient. So what I was helping them understand was, in middle school, your job is to build skills, not just necessarily in basketball, but to build the foundational skills that you need, skills of problem solving, of becoming decision making, critical thinking, so that as you get older, when it's time to enact those skills, you can reach back and use the skills that you are now proficient in because you built them and because you built a strong foundation as a kid. So it's funny because, so I told them that I told the students that story. And after a student empowerment session, I always do like a Q&A. And a lot of times students will ask questions like, you're from North Carolina? Have you ever met LaMelo Ball, who's a basketball player for the Hornets? Or you have a YouTube channel. Have you ever met Mr. Beast, who's like a big YouTuber? Like they'll ask random questions or, like things that are not aligned. After that student empowerment session, a sixth grader, I'll never forget this, a sixth grader raised his hand and he said, so what are some of the skills that we should be building now to have a successful future? Because, and the only difference was that I shared the story and locked him in. And as a matter of fact, I just used the story to show you the power of storytelling, to show you why that is an effective engagement strategy. Like as you were listening to the story of me telling you a story that I told, I'm sure you were thinking, oh man, like, I get it. It unlocks the same thing that I'm saying for you in your classroom. Why is it that students are going to pay attention to this lesson? We can use storytelling techniques. We can weave in some stories, some interesting facts, really get them grounded in the why to help engage them. And when we are engaging, then it leads to increased retention. So to answer the question in a nutshell, how do we plan more effective and engaging lessons? Effective lessons are lessons that are aligned to the standards. What is the intended standard line outcome for this lesson? And how I know that students achieved it, through a check for understanding. And how to be engaging, ask yourself the question, why would students want to pay attention to this lesson? If you ask yourself that question, I guarantee your lessons will become more engaging. Actually, there are 10 more strategies of engagement. Storytelling is one strategy of engagement. There are 10 more strategies of engagement on the Impact platform where I recorded a lesson on how to become more engaging for your students, right? Recorded a lesson, it's there. You give access to the full course library. Remember, earlier I told you about classroom management. Now we're talking about student engagement. Both of those courses live on the Impact platform, and you can have access to all the courses as well as all the community membership components as well as coaching on the Impact platform. All right, it's linked in the show notes and in the description below. The final question, you still with me? You rocking with me? Shout out to anybody who's still here. I know that sometimes when we get onto a podcast episode, my YouTube analytics show that most people watch some of it. Few people watch all of it. So if you are still here, I honestly, truly say that you are in the minority, and that is amazing, not just for me, but for you and your students in their future. So I just want to celebrate you for just a moment. Shout out you for sticking around this long, because the skills that you are learning and acquiring are really going to help unlock your best school year. Absolutely, for sure. Last question, how can I build strong relationships with my students? How can I build strong relationships with my students? The way I always like to put it is to develop know, like, and trust. That is a business principle that I'm sharing with you. If you think about a brand that you frequent, Target, Chick-fil-A, Starbucks, right? Amazon, places where you go all the time, it's because you know, like, and trust them. Yes, you know Amazon. Then you see the logos all over the place, right? You like the fact that Amazon is going to give you your desired product for an affordable price and probably within 2 days if you have Prime. Right? And you trust them because you can read all of the reviews before you purchase it. And then when you get it, you know that even if you don't like it, you can send it back. So you trust them enough to make purchases with them. Is that making sense? You know, you like, and you trust them. If that works for businesses, and that'll work with every business, any business that you frequent, you look at the businesses that you go to a lot, it's because you know, like, and trust them. The same is true for our students. In order to build relationships with our students, we have to get students to know, like, and trust us. Real briefly, let me help you show how to know, like, and trust you as a teacher. To get students to know, like, and trust you, to know you, you have to share information about yourself. Now, I'm not saying, now watch this. I had a teacher this last year that everybody in the building knew that she was going through divorce. Everybody, when I say everybody in the building, The students knew it, the teachers knew it, the custodians knew it. Everybody in the building knew she was going through a divorce because she just was telling everybody. She would tell students, "I won't be here on Friday because I have to go to divorce court." Everybody knew. Students would ask her like, "How is your how's your divorce going?" Right? I am not at all saying that students need to be all in your business, right? I am not at all saying that. Like, there's some things that you could probably keep to yourself. What I'm saying is, share information about yourself that you don't mind the world knowing. I'm just gonna say the world. I was about to say that you don't mind students knowing, but I'm gonna say that you don't mind the world knowing because if you tell students, you can just assume that the world is gonna know. Okay, let's just put it like that. So share information about yourself that you do not mind the world knowing. Okay, because when in sharing that information, it allows students to get to know you, and when students get to know you, then that's how you start building relationships with them. You also want to get to know them, right? All right. Ask them some questions. Definitely know their name. Pronounce it the right way. Use it frequently, often, right? Know them as well. To get students to like you, we can actually pull a strategy from the engagement where with storytelling. You get students to like you by connection, sharing stories, right? It doesn't have to be personal stories. It could just be storytelling, period. It's people who tell, you can tell engaging stories, it can become likable. But more importantly than that, there's this connection that is made. Connect over shared experiences. That's how you get somebody to like you. Think about people that you like. People that you like, friends or whoever it is, the reason why you like them is because you connect over some sort of shared experiences. So what are some similarities that you can find with your students? And then lastly, trust you. How to get them to trust you is to prove that you are reliable. Say what you mean what you say. When you say that you're going to do something, make sure that you do that thing, right? Also, help them see some sort of transformation. We trust people that help us to see some sort of transformation. Even if it's a simple transformation like teaching you how to tie your shoe. I trust that if you can teach me how to tie my shoe and I now am proficient in tying my shoe, I trust that next time you tell me you can teach me something, that you're telling me the truth. So even a micro transformation, they will get to trust you if you say, "Hey, now when you're," I'm always gonna go, not always, but I like to go with math analogies because I'm a math teacher. I was a math teacher, but when you say things like, "All right, man, so right here, what I'm noticing is when you're adding with decimals, you oftentimes you cross over the decimal. The reason why is because you're writing at a slant. But if you turn the paper just a little bit and you kind of keep it aligned, or if you use graph paper, then you remember where the decimal is, and that'll keep you from transposing those numbers. Try that." Man, if you try that and then they start to get more questions right, that was a simple shift. But they start to get more questions right because they're more aligned and more organized, or they're using graph paper or whatever it is, they're not losing a decimal. Now I trust you, right? At least a little bit, but now I'm like, "Oh, okay, you know what you're talking about," or "Oh, okay, like the information that you give me is helpful." So by providing even micro transformations, you're building trust between you and the students. So to get the students to know you, share information about you that you are comfortable with the world knowing. To get students to like you, connect over similarities and shared experiences. And to get students to trust you, make sure that you provide help them to see micro transformations, something that they were not able to do before, they can do now as a result of your intervention. The question that you can ask yourself when it comes to building relationships is, what can we connect about? You and the students, what can we connect about? That's really the overarching question. If you can find some things that you and the students can connect about, can connect over, can connect through, you're building relationships. And I believe that every single student that you teach, there's some way to connect, right? Maybe you enjoy the same football team, right? Maybe you both grew up in a single parent home. Maybe you and their parents went to the same college. Maybe you guys both watch, what's that called? Anime, or you read manga or whatever it is. What are some of the things I guarantee you and every student can connect over something. And if you can find something that you can connect with the students, even the most rough students, even if you are a white female trying to reach black males, like it doesn't matter. There's something that you can connect about. And when you find that connection, that's how you start to foster and grow that relationship. So to answer the question, how do we start to build relationships as new teachers? Find ways to connect with your students and make sure that they know, like, and trust you. All right. So those were the top 3 questions that new teachers ask, and those are my answers to them based off of my experience from somebody who was a terrible teacher that eventually transitioned to a 2-time teacher of the year and now trains other teachers to do the same. Right. And remember, this entire episode is sponsored by Impact. It is included in the show notes in the description below, but it is your full comprehensive solution for your professional development needs, featuring the 3 C's: courses, community, and coaching, to help next school year be your best school year. Learn how to master the proven principles of effective instruction so that you can match them with your special skills and make specific strategies to have the impact in your classroom that only you can. All right, I'm Daryl Williams Jr., and I will see you in the next episode.